Okay, I'm gonna admit everyone.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. This is the public workshop for Rule 1200 and 1210 amendments. We're just going to wait just another minute here to let some other folks join in. I think we'll probably get going right here at 10:02. We should have plenty of time to get into comments and feedback. So we'll just give everyone another quick minute to join in. Thank you. Okay. It appears the attendees list has slowed down, so I think we'll go ahead and get started then. So we'll get going pretty much right on time. It's 10:01. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Hopefully everyone has had a good night's sleep after the good Padre game yesterday. Hopefully everyone got a chance to check out that. Big Padre fan here. So, but in any case, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today and taking some time out of your busy day to attend today's public workshop. Today we'll be presenting draft proposed administrative amendments to Rules 1200 and 1210, which apply to stationary sources of toxic air contaminants. My name is Nick Cormier, and I'm the Rule Development Supervisor here at the district. And with me today are several district staff members that are here to help address any questions that you may have. We're here today to share information about the draft proposal and to receive your comments and feedback. We're recording today's workshop and we'll post it on APCD's YouTube page by the end of this week. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. And next slide, please. So today's brief presentation will include a background, some background information on the rules, a summary of the proposed rule amendments, and then we'll get into your comments and questions. And then finally, we'll just briefly cover some next steps and what to expect after today's workshop. I don't expect this workshop to go the entire hour and a half that we have set aside for the presentation and the Q&A, but we're happy to stay here as long as needed to answer your questions and feedback. And if there's anything that we can't answer today, we'll take it back with us and then hopefully address it formally in a response to comments report that would be forthcoming in a few weeks. Next slide, please. So initially adopted in 1996, District Rules 1200 and 1210 serve as the cornerstones of the agency's program to reduce public exposure to toxic emissions from industrial and commercial facilities. Some of the types of sources and toxic emissions these rules addressed include diesel particulate matter from stationary engines, benzene emissions from gas dispensing facilities, hexavalent chromium from chrome plating operations, and arsenic emissions from haul roads, just as a few examples. Rule 1200 applies to new or modified stationary equipment and processes. It requires installation of best available control technology when necessary to meet health protective exposure levels for air toxics. Rule 1210 applies to existing industrial and commercial facilities. It sets the health risk limits at which existing sources must notify surrounding communities and reduce health risks from toxic emissions. Next slide, please. Implementation of these rules requires a coordinated multi-agency effort in accordance with state law. The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, is responsible for identifying all known toxic air contaminants that pose a threat to public health. The California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, known as OEHA, is required to prepare guidelines and procedures by which health risk assessments are prepared. The health risk values to be used when conducting HRAs are identified in OEHA's technical support document. Finally, OEHA is required to follow a public process whenever adopting health risk values. This process includes public review and workshop and consideration by a panel of scientific experts. Next slide, please. So what's the issue? Why are we now proposing administrative amendments to Rules 1200 and 1210? The rules currently include tables 1 through 3, listing all the state-designated toxic air contaminants and corresponding health risk values. These tables are included in the rules to facilitate ready access to the state's information. However, as a result, the district is obligated to amend the rules and update the tables whenever the state identifies a toxic compound or adopts new health risk values. This is a common occurrence. The district's tables have required updating at least 15 times since the rules were adopted. To help manage this rulemaking workload, the current rules incorporate a streamlined process for updates, whereby the Air Pollution Control Officer amends the rules tables directly without a need for approval by the district governing board, upon the state's approval of new health risk values and following a 30-day public notice by the district. However, CARB recently completed an audit of the district's program, including Rules 1200 and 1210. And CARB found that the district's streamlined process for updating the rules tables without board approval wasn't consistent with the procedural requirements of state law and should be struck from the rules. Next slide, please. So therefore, the district has drafted rule amendments to remove corresponding tables 1 through 3 from Rules 1200 and 1210, and instead incorporate the state-adopted list of toxics and health risk values by statutory reference instead. As you'll see in the changed copy of the rules, the tables themselves have been removed, and references to the tables within the rule, such as in the definitions where tables are noted, have been revised to reflect relevant statutory references found in California Health and Safety Code. Concurrently, the district proposes to enhance local outreach to help ensure stakeholders remain informed of and retain access to the state's latest health risk values for use in HRAs. For example, we will create and maintain a district webpage that highlights pertinent information, including links to the state's official lists of toxics and health risk values, their workshop announcements for any health risk values under development, and where to sign up for their email subscription service. We believe this change in timely notification of pollutants being added to the state-adopted list of toxic and health risk values will help ensure stakeholders are kept informed of such updates in a more proactive manner that occurs today. Next slide, please. The proposed rule amendments will also improve program efficiency by preventing the need and lag time to officially amend the rules tables whenever the state adopts a new health risk value for use in HRAs. In the past, this process has taken months or even years to complete internally due to limited staff resources available to process such changes. The proposed amendments will also better ensure that the applicable state-adopted health effect values are considered when conducting HRAs for stationary sources in the region. Finally, the proposal will implement a state recommendation to improve consistency with the procedural requirements for adopting rule amendments. Next slide, please. You may find the changed copy of the draft proposed amendments and corresponding bilingual fact sheets on the district's rule development webpage, which is linked on the slide here. If we have posted a link to the fact sheet in the chat box, and if someone from our team could post the change copies as well in the chat, that would be great, to the direct links of each rules. If you'd like to submit comments or questions after today's presentation, we'll be accepting comments through October 2nd, which is next Wednesday. We will consider the comments received, and then we'll complete a response to comments report to formally address all feedback received and present the final proposal to the governing board in early 2025. The exact month of when the item will be considered by the board has not been set yet, as the board has not set their meeting dates for 2025 quite yet. If you have any additional questions or comments about the proposed amendments, please feel free to reach out to me or call me directly. My email address is nick.cormier, C-O-R-M-I-E-R, stapcd.org. And my phone number is 858-586-2798. Next slide, please. So that was our brief presentation. We appreciate your time and attention. And at this point, we'll open up the workshop to comments and questions that everyone may have. We'd like to ask that you raise your Zoom hand or provide your comments in the chat if you don't feel comfortable verbally expressing it. And then we'll call upon you in the order that it appears on my screen. As a reminder, we'll be doing our best to tentatively respond to any feedback today, but our official responses that will be on the record will be included in our forthcoming response to comments report that everybody in this room will receive a copy of via email in the next few weeks once it's complete. So with that, I think we'll go to the raised hands, and I see Steve Jepson, and then we'll go to Alex Acetunio. Sorry. So Steve.
Good morning. Thanks for the presentation, Nick. Yeah, you're right. That was brief. So my name's Steve Jepson. I'm the executive director for Clean Water SoCal. We represent 80 water and wastewater agencies in Southern California. And I'm sure your team is aware of this, but I just wanted to make sure to reiterate that under CARB's EICG rule, the waste sector has until 2028 to respond to the new list of 1,700 compounds that CARB has generated. And the reason for that is we don't have inventory of all the toxic compounds we may use. We accept society's waste. So to determine which of those 1,700 compounds may be emitted, we're going to be doing a two-step testing process. So our compound list will remain status quo until 2028. So if you want to revisit this in detail separately, happy to, but I wanted to just make sure that the team has that awareness.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that comment, and perhaps we can set up a call or something with you directly online to make sure our team we're kind of in sync with everything that's going on. So yeah, that's a good point. And then if it's okay, we'll probably reach out to you to make sure that we're all on the same page there.
That sounds great, Nick. Thank you. I'll send you an email with my contact information. And we're also eager to meet with you on the topic of the design of our two-step process that we're working with CARB on right now. We're meeting with South Coast Air Quality Management District next week to talk about testing protocols, and we'd love to meet with your team soon as well also.
Sure, that sounds good. Look forward to your email.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Alex and then Anna.
Hi, Nick. Thank you for the presentation. It was quite short. But I guess I'm requesting a little bit more historical context in the sense that if we're getting these two rules amended, why was their purpose and why do they exist in the first place? Because I want to understand. I understand that we're amending them because it takes too long to inform the community if there's toxins in the air and water. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yes. I mean, the intent of they kind of serve two purposes. So the Rule 1200. Well, let me take a step back. Both of the rules are intended to make sure that exposure to toxic air contaminants from stationary sources is reduced. And that comes through implementation of the rule when facilities have to produce and prepare a health risk assessment that goes into their operations and how much how much exposure is produced by their operations. So that all gets factored into that analysis. And so what 1200 does is it looks at specifically new and modified sources of pollution, whereas 1210 is looking at the existing sources. And this is a process that all the air districts do throughout the state. We've been implementing it for some time. It's required by state law that facilities produce HRAs if they're subject. There's some differing requirements of whether facility is subject to an HRA or not. But if they are, then they're subject to the requirements that are found in these rules. Does that answer your question, or do I need a little bit more specific information on that?
A little bit more. So the proposal is to amend these two rules, yes? Because
Correct.
they take too long to process? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so the intent of this is to ensure that we're capturing and accounting for all of the pollutants that are on the CARB maintained list, which is the state consolidated list, to make sure those are incorporated at the time that those compounds are added to the CARB list. So what has happened in the past is CARB would add a new health value to their consolidated list, and then it would be a few months or even some years for us to get around to updating our respective lists that is currently in rules 1200 and 1210 to be able to capture those pollutants in any HRAs that are done. And so there's a time lag there that, for some HRAs that were done, they perhaps didn't have to look at some pollutants that might have been added. There wasn't a huge time lag, but in some cases there was a compounding factor that on our end, on the district's end, that it would be cleaner to do it if we just reference those tables directly to CARB. And so that's really the intent here. And the other intent is that through the audit that CARB produced, we were making these changes to the tables without governing board approval. And that was something that the CARB believed wasn't fully meeting in the spirit of amending rules. It wasn't meeting health and safety code to require a change to a rule that didn't require governing board approval. They generally say that if you're going to make any kind of substantial change to the rule, you need governing board approval. And that the process we've been doing didn't really fully meet the spirit of that. And so that's by changing it to simply referencing it to the state lists, it addresses that requirement, and it also allows the district to not have to go in and revise these rules using whatever process if a new health value is added by CARB or WEHA in the future.
Okay. And then I guess my actual question is, to make sure that the tables that are being referenced are accurate or not being washed by politicians, which is kind of, I have a case study in my mind that I don't want to bring up, but what's the safeguard there? How do we make sure or ensure that that's not going to happen?
Yeah, I think the process that we're proposing to do probably alleviates some of that concern, maybe. If there was a concern about, maybe a politician or a board member saying, I don't want to include this pollutant. The fact that we're referencing it straight from when CARB and OWEHA, include those health values on the list, that it kind of removes that interception point where that could happen, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So it's really, while the same pollutants are being accounted for, whether they're in our list in the rule today or being referred to them on the CARB and WEHA list, there's really no change in what pollutants we're covering. There's really no change at all. It's just how we get there is the process that it's changing. And we think that looking at the lists themselves will actually allow us to be a little bit more nimble when looking at HRAs to account for pollutants when they're added.
Okay, that brings up another question for me, but I want to give other folks a chance to ask their questions, so I'll circle back, or maybe I'll email you.
Sure.
Thank
you. We'll go to Anna and then Jack.
Hi, Nick. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Anna Corcoran. I'm an environmental scientist with MSH Consulting. And my question is, with these more instantaneous updates referencing the tables, would a TAC effectively need to be considered as soon as it's updated or added by CARB? And specifically, I'm asking this in the context of a facility who's in the process of an HRA. If the tables were to be updated during that process, how might that impact the facility?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So I think the answer to your question is yes, but I think the reason that the way that we're looking at it is that there's really no existing change to the process that we're currently doing in relation to that. So, for example, you know, if a facility has a current application and APCD using our existing process that's in the rule, we decide to put those pollutants in the tables, and we finalize those all while the application is being circulated internally. That is still something that the facility would need to account for once those pollutants were formally added to the tables. This existing the process that we're proposing and just referencing it to CARBs and a WEHA's list would effectively do the same thing, but we don't believe that there's going to be an impact there from our end and from the facilities end, at least from our. We also are combining this with an enhanced outreach information kind of sharing proposal so that we can ensure that facilities know early and often about pollutants that may be coming down the road. And so that's really not something that we've been doing. But I think through this process, we're hoping to be a little bit more proactive about it to make sure that if there is something coming down the pipeline, that facilities know about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jack and then Jesse.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for the workshop today, and thanks for the reference to the triple play last night in the Padres game. For people that didn't get a chance to see that, only 2 of those this whole season, so it was a remarkable event, and I'm glad you reminded me of it this morning. So, and so since we're talking about triple things, I have just 3 suggestions. One, it is going to build on what Anna was raising, and I just I think for the record want to suggest that for health risk assessments, the chemicals that are required to include should be those that are on the list the day the facility starts its HRA. Whatever comes after that, it gets picked up in the next HRA, but it isn't required as part of that. Otherwise, we'll have a situation where you're constantly amending and constantly changing. And I just think it opens the door for a lot of errors and potential oversight. So if we could, it would be our recommendation to include some language that states exactly when the chemical is, the list is finalized as far as a given HRA is concerned. The second recommendation was we were talking about the actual public process of meeting with the public, which it's interesting. We've had a couple of years experience at this now, and we've watched that the public meetings take place in different parts of the county. And I think it's probably fair to say that if there are 1 or 2 members of or sometimes 3 members of the public there, that's about the most we ever see. In the meantime, the facility is required to provide a translator for the meeting, even though there may not be anybody who needs translation. So well, we would like to operate under the same rules that the ABC governing board uses, which is if the translator has been requested, then the facility would have to provide and retain one. And again, it's an expense that if it doesn't have to be made, it represents a significant savings. So however, if there's a request for a translator, then it has to be provided. Even south, as my understanding, the South Coast only requires a translator if that has been requested in advance. So we would like to suggest that addition to the process. And then with regard to the frequency of the meetings, of the public meetings, when it used to be every other year, and again, we've seen the sort of low level of interest that the public has in almost all of these meetings. So we'd like to suggest that we go back to an every other year requirement for the public meeting when that's required. And if something changes, if it's some huge public interest issue, or you get some indication of feedback to that point and need to go to an every year, well, we understand that. But otherwise, I think we've got some good experience with these public meetings now, and can see that the level of interest in most of them is very, very low. And so rather than having to marshal a bunch of resources and spend a lot of money on translators and frequent meetings, we'd like to suggest that we, if they're not a high interest item, that they go back to an every other year. So those will be just 3 recommendations to offer this morning.
Okay, thank you, Jack. I appreciate those comments, and we'll probably more formally respond to those in the workshop report that we produce. But appreciate bringing those up, and we'll consider those a little bit more internally. I do want to note that you know, we are on somewhat of a streamlined process for this particular rule amendment, just given the resources that we have. So we'll have to balance what we can produce in this particular rulemaking with the resources that we have kind of set aside for it. So we'll have to kind of manage that as we move along. But thank you for bringing that up, and we'll look into it a little bit during our workshop report phase.
Thank you. And if it would help, Nick, we'd be happy to offer some language so that you could take as a starting point to work with. I know sometimes that's a time saver. So just let us know if there's anything we can provide to you that would help in that consideration.
Sure, we'll take a look. Thanks, Jack.
Okay.
Jesse.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question. So I see the rule, one rule applies to existing equipment and the other one exists to new equipment. I have 9 stationary generators. I'm in the process of replacing one. Replacing one, is that going to affect the type of generator or what the requirements for a new generator?
You know, I'm probably going to have to punt that maybe to Steven to see if he's got any thoughts about that. Steven, from our team, do you have any?
There's not going to be any changes to the diesel health values or any of the health values that we're using for the acute assessment on diesel engines.
Okay.
None of the emission factors are changing for natural gas either. So it shouldn't make any difference whether you applied before or after this rule change, what's going to happen to that permit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions? We've got plenty of time. So if there's any other comments or feedback, we'd be happy to entertain it at this point. And if not, last call. If not, we can probably get some time back in our days. While we're waiting on maybe just some last minute feedback, just a reminder that we're hoping to get any comments submitted either verbally or by email to us by October 2nd. That's next Wednesday. We'd be happy to take any feedback. Feel free to email me reach out to me if you have any questions or comments. And then as a reminder, we're hoping to get to, oh, thank you. We're hoping to get to the board early next year with these amendments. If there are any tweaks to what we've put out to the change copies that are online, we'll note those in the response to comments report that comes out, so that everybody's clear on what's been modified. I see a couple comments in the chat that just came in. Question from Jason that says, how does this rule affect currently installed diesel generators? Stephen, would you mind perhaps answering that one too?
Sure. So the currently installed ones will already have permits, so it won't necessarily affect their current permitting. Based on what is at the facility and how many diesel generators there are, you could trigger a health risk assessment based on the toxic emissions inventory. And depending on the results of that health risk assessment, there could be modifications that need to be made to the equipment at the facility. But there's the changes in this for this rule, what we're doing today doesn't affect what's already in effect. So it shouldn't change anything that's already happening at your facility.
Thanks, Steven. And Jason, if that answers your question, or if we need some additional feedback, just let us know. I see Patty's comment. The comment or question is, will the emission factors for gasoline dispensing facilities be affected with these rule changes? I believe that's not the case. Stephen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe emission factors are going to be affected at all by this rulemaking.
We're not changing any emission factors based on this rule change.
Right. Okay, and I think that's all the comments. Give maybe a couple more seconds to see if any other last minute comments. Thank you, Patty. Okay. Once again, if you'd like to go back and review this presentation again, we know it was brief, but if you want any additional information, we're hoping to get the YouTube stream, the YouTube recording up on the website on APCD's YouTube page by the end of this week. So be on the lookout for that. And then there's a few that we may reach out individually to. I think we'll reach out to Steve to get some more information about his the information he shared today. And then we need to get in touch with anybody else, we will. So I think we'll go ahead and call an end to the meeting. Thank you everyone for attending, and appreciate your time today. And have a good day. Go Padres.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Nick and Stephen. Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye, everybody.